Hello and welcome! DS backwards compatibility on the 3DS is great. Not only can I play older DS games on it, but I can also use some of the DS's more obscure features like DS download play on it. However, one feature which seems to almost be impossible to use is Nintendo Wi-Fi on early DS games. It's not that the feature doesn't work, it just seems like I can't connect to any Wi-Fi router regardless of setting. And this issue exists not just on the 3DS, but on all DS models. And doing some poking around, I learned not just why this is happening, but also how to connect your Nintendo DS games to Wi-Fi, and what still works with it today. Well, I'll tell you after a quick message from this video's sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by 16-Bit Store. At 16-Bit Store, we design and 3D print a variety of items for your video games and consoles. From our styluses to our display stands, we take pride in our designs for all products that we create and the finished quality of our prints. If you are interested or just want to help out the channel, why not visit the 16-Bit Store today? And if you use offer code 16BitReview on Etsy, you'll get 15% off your order when you buy 2 or more items. So why doesn't original DS games recognize my modern 3DS connections? And why does it show me this weird pastel colored menu? Well, all this has to do with how the 3DS and DSi handles original DS games, and has a lot to do with when the original DS was made. You see, the original DS was made and released in 2004 and presumably was in development back in the early 2000s. And the world of interconnected wireless devices was completely different and less secure than it is today. Most Wi-Fi routers I remember at the time had either no Wi-Fi security on it at all, since it wasn't even a concern back then, and for those who were aware and wanted to have security, the only security settings that was available at the time was WEP. And that was a bit of a problem for the DS, since when it was made, or was in development, the DS would only connect to, or at least had to recognize, WEP and open networks. Simple. However, in the early 2000s, it was proven that WEP wasn't secure as they initially thought it was. Fortunately for those who were concerned with network security, they replaced WEP with WPA, and eventually the more secure WPA2, and eventually 3. But since Nintendo never implemented WPA on the DS, like Sony eventually did, or patched in with the PSP, the only networks that early DS games could even think about connecting to was either an open network or a WEP network. And this quickly became a problem as the 2000s rolled on and more people were getting online with WPA enabled routers. So when Nintendo was working on their next revision of the DS, their internet focused console, the DSi, they decided to enable it with WPA and WPA2 networks. And with the transition to a newer DS console, the newer DS games like Pokemon Black and White can actually utilize the DSi's newer connection settings and connect to WPA networks, which made some old DS games usable, but only if they knew to look for the new connection settings. For older DS games like Pokemon Diamond and Pearl and Mario Kart, this doesn't work, since in order to ensure good backwards compatibility, the DSi, and by extension the 3DS, was given a DS compatibility layer to allow for older surfaces like DS download play to work, but it also meant that older DS games required to use the old DS Internet Protocol, which requires WEP networks or open networks to play online. With the history lesson over, it should be abundantly clear that in order to get your original DS games online, you'll either need a router or configure your current router so that it uses WEP security, or if you're brave, no security. And I cannot in good faith recommend anybody actually go and do this to their current router. A visible WEP router is the equivalent of having a phone with the password 1234. Sure, it has a password and it's better than nothing, but it's not worth the risk if you value the data in your network or your devices. However, if you are adamant in getting games like Pokemon's Diamond and Pearl or Mario Kart connected and playing online, then Nintendo's own advice for creating a hidden WEP network is, to my knowledge, the most secure way of getting your DS online, since it's the equivalent of having that phone with the password 1234, but burying it in the middle of the yard and telling no one where it is. Sure, if someone can find the phone, it's easily unlocked. But that's going under the assumption that somebody knows that there is a phone buried there in the first place. Now, since every Wi-Fi router is different, I can't step by step walk you through how to do it on your device. But while I'm doing it on my network and showing you how I did it on my networks, I can at least give you general directions to help you at least figure out where to go on your networks. To begin, you need to go and log into your router by entering its IP in a web browser and log in with the default password or the configured password. If you don't know what the password is, I would advise talk to your either network administrator, your parents, or ask Google if this is your router and you just haven't set it up yet. Best case scenario, check the router, it might be written on it. Afterwards, you need to go into wireless network settings and change your 2.4 gigahertz security to WEP. Yes, this will disconnect all of your devices currently connected to that network. If you're having trouble finding these settings, check advanced settings, as sometimes wireless routers tend to hide the more advanced features so that users don't accidentally do what we're doing. Next, we're going to go and set a new password for our router, since WEP uses hexadecimal for whatever reason. So only numbers 0 to 9 and letters A to F can be used when creating it. Kind of limits how creative you can get with your passwords, but it's better than just getting random errors when you try to make something that won't work with it. Now, before you save your new configurations, I might recommend you change the SSID to something that's easily remembered or typable, as you will be turning the SSID broadcast to disabled, since we are trying to hide this router's existence from our neighbors. Again, we are burying an easily unlockable phone, which nobody knows exists except us. Save or apply your settings, and we are ready to set up our DS. We're going to boot the system with a DS game in it. I think the 3DS has its own menu that you can easily access, but it's just easier to go and do this via a game, since everyone can do it. So in the game menu, go and find the Wi-Fi or wireless settings options, and then go into the Nintendo Wi-Fi connection settings. Set the connection that you want, then manual setup, and type in the router's SSID and password. To check to see if it works, save your settings and test the connection. If it works, you'll be online, and congratulations, you are ready to go and connect your DS to the internet and do internet things with it. But I am going to note that if you have a separate router that you're dedicating specifically for the DS Wi-Fi, there is one last step that you can do to ensure that your DS will be the only thing that connects to that network, and that's by enabling the MAC filter. MAC addresses are unique IDs given out to every device when they're manufactured, and there are no two unique MAC addresses, at least that I know of. If you set the MAC filter to only allow certain MAC addresses to connect, that means that your DS will be the only thing that can connect to it. So even if somebody outside your network finds out that you have a hidden WEP network, breaks the encryption, and can try to connect to it, the router won't allow them to, since they need to have a device with the same MAC address as your DS. If you're trying to find your DS's MAC address, some routers will show the MAC address, and you can just add it to the list. But if you can't find that, you can always find the DS's MAC address by going into the Wi-Fi settings, selecting options and system information. Then all you need to do is add the DS's MAC address to your Wi-Fi router's MAC address approved list. Remember, only approved MAC addresses will be able to connect to the Wi-Fi router afterwards. If you need to configure something, you have to plug in if you haven't approved another device. And now that your DS is online, you can connect to the Nintendo Wi-Fi service and trade some poo! Right! I forgot. Nintendo Wi-Fi service has been down for ages, and the only official DS game which can still go online and be considered usable today is the Nintendo DS web browser, which can at least visit Google. But fortunately, due to the dedicated efforts of the MiFi team, they were able to replicate the Nintendo GameSpy server's Nintendo Wi-Fi protocols for both Wii games and original DS games. And you can easily get your DS online by pointing your DS's domain name server, the DNS, to the MiFi server's teams. You'll be able to connect your DS online. So go back into the Wi-Fi settings, manually set your DS's DNS to 164.132.44.106 and the secondary DNS to something that works, like Google's DNS 8888 or OpenDS 1111. And once done, save test, and you can now connect your games online and play your old DS games like Mario Kart or Pokemon on the internet. Do remember though, not all games are supported, and even if the game is supported, there might not be as many active users as there once was. Remember, these are old games. But it's impressive to see active support for such an old piece of hardware. And if you have some spare change, please consider donating to the MiFi project, as if it wasn't for them, the Nintendo DS would most likely be an offline-only experience today. But anyways, that's how you can connect your old DS games to Wi-Fi, and what you can still do with them today, and how to get them workable. I hope you enjoyed this video. And as always, I hope you have yourself a good day, and take care.